Yorokobe Shonen, how are you all doing this fine day? I am doing pretty good myself, recently got a small promotion at work and I got back into gaming after being away from it for a while, so that's pretty nice. But enough of me forcing my small personal successes down your throats like you are dogs that need to swallow a pill. In today's video we are going to be looking at whether or not Petelgeuse Romanée-Conti from ReZero would be able to survive in the world of Dragon Ball, and most importantly how far he would be able to get in said world. But first, let's do a small short synopsis of what ReZero is all about for the ones who don't know anything about it. ReZero is a very popular isekai franchise created by Tappei Nagatsuki, which follows the adventures or well misadventures and life of Natsuki Subaru. One day, whilst returning home from the grocery store, Subaru suddenly finds himself in a new world filled with magic and fantasy. Subaru, being a huge NEET, immediately gets himself ready to become the harem god protagonist he deserves to be. But instead of having a good time with his adventures, Subaru soon realizes he is not quite like the protagonist from his mangas, games and animes. ReZero, starting life in another world, could just as well be called ReZero watched Subaru suffer repeatedly over and over again. Most of Subaru's early days in this world are filled with pain, betrayal, fear and death. And a lot of these events transpired due to the involvement of none other than the focus of today's video. Petelgeuse is by far the one villain which gave Subaru and the gang the most trouble and the worst possible times in the earlier parts of ReZero. But before we get into what all of these events actually entail, it's time for everyone's obligatory spoiler warning. As per usual with these types of videos, I do feel the personal responsibility to throw in a little bit of a spoiler warning. Nothing, and I really do mean nothing, is more annoying than suddenly getting spoiled on major abilities and major plot points of an anime you want to watch. So please do be aware that I will be talking about abilities and plot points that might currently only be available to those who read the original source materials. In layman's terms, anime only people wouldn't understand completely, right? So if you do want to watch the show or read the light novels first before continuing this video, please by all means do so. The light novels themselves are also a very good read, at least to me, so I kind of want you to read them yourselves so you can experience the true story of ReZero at your own pace. But with that little bit of a warning out of the way, let's talk more about Archbishop Romanée-Conti. To start off our story, Petelgeuse Romanée-Conti was a Sin Archbishop of the witch cult representing the Slav witch factor, which was originally held by the Witch of Slav Sekhmet. In addition to his position as a Sin Archbishop, he was also a spirit with a connection to the sage Flugel. Due to this, Petelgeuse lived for 4 centuries and was also a co-founder of the witch cult itself as one of its oldest members. He himself was part of the moderate faction of the witch cult, whilst another archbishop led the radical faction of the cult instead. These two factions were often in a state of conflict with one another as their core values differed greatly, even though they were both part of the same organization in the end. But moving back to Petelgeuse, he was a thin and frail man, or well, thin and frail spirit really. His cheeks were gaunt and the skin on his bones was unusually thin. If it weren't for the fact that his decorum was that of sheer madness and insanity, he could easily be mistaken as a walking corpse. His complexion was deathly pale and had a sickly green tint to it, just like his hair. But despite his slight teeny tiny tad of insanity and his general lack of any real social norms, there was one thing Petelgeuse always kept in pristine condition, which was his bowl cut. But he did not always look as deranged as he does now. Give or take 100 years ago, he was actually a pretty normal functioning member of society, but a certain incident caused him to lose his marbles. The source of this incident, you ask? Yep, you guessed it. Whammon. But no, like, jokes aside, right? I won't delve into that much detail of his past for now, because I do want you to experience certain parts of the show for yourself, so if you really want to know the reason for his insanity, be sure to watch the show at your own pace. But after this set of events, Petelgeuse joined the radical faction of the cult and became one of its most deadly and most feared members. He became notorious for his cruelty, frequently slaughtering entire towns and villages, acting strictly according to his gospel's writ. And with that, we have covered the general backstory of Petelgeuse, at least up to the point where he fights against the main character. So I think it's high time we get to the real bread and butter of this video. What abilities does Petelgeuse bring to the table? Let's start things off with his best known ability, the Unseen Hands. At some point in time, Petelgeuse took in the witch factor of Slav and manifested the ability to use the Unseen Hands. These Unseen Hands were a technique that allowed Petelgeuse to summon numerous invisible arms from his body that he could move and extend using his mind. Just one of these unseen hands was strong enough to tear through flesh, break and bend bones, and shatter rocks like they were nothing. Petelgeuse could also strengthen his unseen hands by merging several hands together into a bigger hand. At his maximum potential, he could summon close to 100 unseen hands at once. And to top that off, the unseen hands and the force behind each one was akin to a cannonball or a bomb of sorts. But what really made these hands especially strong was that, save for Subaru, Petelgeuse was the only person who could actually see the unseen hands. Other people would just see something breaking out of nowhere when he used his ability. Petelgeuse was also just as creative as he was mad, which can be seen by him creatively using his unseen hands to fly, though in reality he's simply playing catch with his body being the thrown object. And even though he really barely used it, he could also perform earth magic as seen by him using Uldona to defend against Julius during their battle. But surprisingly, the unseen hand is not necessarily his most powerful ability. Another ability which can be deemed equally impressive is his ability to possess people and take over their bodies to use as his own vessel. If you remember from a bit earlier in the video, Petelgeuse is actually a spirit. He's not a man, he's just a spirit that inhabits the body of a man. He does not truly have one body he can call his own, quote unquote. He can possess several of his followers which are deemed as his fingers, or people who happen to be compatible with him even if they are not a part of his following. This essentially makes him immortal as long as he has compatible people near him when he dies. But he does have to share a part of his witch factor with them in order to make them suitable for possession, even whilst he's not using their body yet. He has to kind of prepare the body to be ready for inhabitation. So this does mean that the more he delegates his witch factor among his followers, the fewer the amount of unseen hands he can use at once becomes. But he does trade this off with the security that not even death can truly stop him under normal circumstances. Oh, and you do need to keep in mind that his powers do actually transfer alongside him to whichever new body he will inhabit. It's not like he leaves the unseen hands behind. He does actually keep it. And a final quote-unquote ability, I suppose, comes in the form of his gospel. It's not really an ability, but it's a useful item, right? A gospel is a defective copy of Echidna's Book of Wisdom. Although it does detail the future of its owner, the events conveyed are subject to change and the information provided is often, up for their own interpretation. It doesn't really spell everything out, you do have to think for yourself what it means. And with that, I think we have pretty much covered the abilities of Petelgeuse. So let's not waste any time and get straight to how far I think Petelgeuse could get in the world of Dragon Ball. So in the case of Petelgeuse, I think he could get surprisingly far if things go his way. One of Petelgeuse's strongest abilities does not really lie in his actual abilities. It's actually his ability to garner followers for his cult. In a weird and kind of a morbid way, his insanity also makes him a very charismatic leading figure to follow. He kind of reminds me of Rasputin, right? Like a batshit insane guy, but most certainly not a stupid one. I am very confident that Petelgeuse could start up his witch cult fairly easily even if he just spawned in Dragon Ball. There will always be fanatics who need something or someone to turn to when they are at their lowest point in life. And with the aid of his gospel, he will be certain to recruit these individuals. If I had to predict how the first bits of Dragon Ball would go with Petelgeuse involved, I imagine the witch cult would become a bit of a rivaling faction to the Red Ribbon Army. And truth be told, I think Petelgeuse could wipe the floor with the Red Ribbon Army and come out on top as the new primary antagonist, quote unquote, of that arc. And with his unseen hands and his ability to cheat death through possession, I think he could possibly make it towards the beginning of Z-ish. It would probably not be very easy for him, definitely not, but I don't think it would be an impossible scenario for him to make it to some of the Saiyans arriving. But that's also where it becomes very tough for me to give him a pass to the next sagas. Starting from Raditz, we get some of the biggest power creeps in Dragon Ball, because we go from power levels under 1,000 to power levels in the millions relatively fast, right? Petelgeuse might have several ways to kind of cheat his way through power levels, like his unseen hands could easily kill and surprise someone who might be way stronger than him, his earth magic could also be a nice ace up his sleeve, his gospel might be able to warn him of hairy situations so he can avoid them, and he could potentially escape death by possessing one of his followers or a compatible body. But that does not make him omnipotent. Starting from guys like Raditz and Nappa, I highly doubt his unseen hands could instantly bag him a win. And unless he gets so incredibly lucky that he can possess the strongest person in every arc who just happens to be compatible with him, he is not making it past the arrival of the Saiyans. Like, I don't see that happening. And whilst I can definitely see him making it through Dragon Ball because he is really not a weak character by any means, you might even be able to talk me into believing he could make it past Raditz if luck would be on his sides and like all of his stars would align perfectly. But Nappa and Vegeta? Nah man, like even if you try to wank him to the moon and back, I do not see him winning that fight. And if all hell breaks loose and Petelgeuse manages to possess Nappa or some shit, like it wouldn't matter, right? Because if Vegeta just blows up the planet, Petelgeuse also can't possess anybody to revive himself. For me, it's pretty clear cut that his absolute ceiling in Dragon Ball would be somewhere between the arrival of Raditz and the arrival of Nappa and Vegeta. But he could probably lose earlier too if luck decides to just not be in his favor. But the concept of the witch cult colliding with the Red Ribbon Army in OG Dragon Ball does really sound sick as hell to me. I would honestly love to see some fan manga or maybe like a light novel or something about that concept if any aspiring writers or mangaka happen to watch this video. You know, be my guest, like I would love to see a story about that. But yeah, what do you guys think? Did I do a proper job of trying to rank Petelgeuse or did I get this entire thing completely wrong? Do let me know your own takes on this in the comments down below. And with all of that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for watching today's video. As per usual, I truly do appreciate every single viewer that takes the time out of their day to watch my content. It just makes me happy that like even 10 people, you know, watch my content and enjoys themselves. So if you would like to see more of my content in the future, please do consider clicking the subscribe button and turning on all notifications for my channel. I would also really appreciate it if you would maybe consider liking the video and even watching one of my other videos on my channel as well. So work hard, study well and eat and sleep plenty, and I will see you all again in the next video. Peace out.